Food's going to get more expensive because they're actually destroying the areas to grow food. Those wheat fields, they're covered in windmills. You can't plant under there anymore. They're wiping out part of the food source by installing all this new tech on top.
I'm wondering if they're trying to get us to use less energy because they're going to need that energy to run their AI, which will be the basis for like these smart cities. Does that sort of make any sense to you? Joining us for the first time on Geopolitics and Empire is David Dubine of the Adapt 2030 channel and Civilization Cycle podcast, where he discusses timelines for what you can expect from now through 2030 as society resets so you can keep your families safe.
This earth is so abundant. Tremendously, it would boggle your mind how abundant our earth is. And what we're not getting told is what's beneath the crust that continually refills. I would agree oil. I would agree water as well. But again, those are finite resources, aren't they?
Yeah, I think, I'm sold on what you said. I've traveled the planet and it's just vast open spaces filled with greenery, but most people want to live in the overcrowded cities. And then, before asking you where are places to go, do you fear, this threat of World War III, the nuclear specter, how serious do you take that?
I mean, I'm looking at it from a historical perspective, and please, I'm just going to say my piece on this one here. Since Hiroshima, we have in our collective militaries lit off over 2,000 different devices, underground, undersea, above ground, upper atmosphere. It doesn't matter. We've gone from the ionosphere with Starfish Prime all the way down to the Bikini Atolls and everything in between. 2,000 plus. And we are still here. So if it was a limited exchange where there might be two over there, couple here, now imagine the terror, the panic that would create. But in the grand scheme of things, 4 nukes going off, 5, would it really do much? Not really on the entire planetary ecosystem, but for the mental health of the planet, it would go off the rails. So but just in a historical perspective, 2,000 of those devices have been detonated, and we are all still here. So a couple more of limited and smaller kilotonnage, I don't think it would have much effect on the environment. But I just repeated myself, so I'll stop.
I have the same view. I've lived near and visited one of the patches where they've dropped a quarter of those that you mentioned, the Polygon, 120 kilometers from Semei, Semipalatinsk, where I spent 3 years. And it's an 18,000 square kilometer section, the Polygon, where Stalin dropped his first nuke in 49, and they dropped 500 plus there above ground until early 60s when the treaty was passed. After that, underground. And I visited one of the ground zeros, radioactive patch of land. And so I don't buy into the nuclear winter theory. Sure, as you mentioned, if some nukes are dropped, which is horrible, but I don't think it's going to be some end of the world scenario. I think with a lot of stuff that we're discussing, they take a kernel of truth and then they blow it up. Like you mentioned, there's environmental pollution. Oh, but now climate change, CO2, we're all going to die. No. Same thing with nukes, right? But it's not going to be some nuclear, Terminator 3 Skynet, cold nuclear winter. Your thoughts on then, where are some places maybe people can look into?
The dollar's being eviscerated as the U.S. is creating $100,000 of debt per second. BRICS nations introduce a new global currency called the unit. The unit would be pegged at 40% to gold and 60% to a basket of BRICS currencies, a statement token using the gold held within their borders. What do you think is going to happen with metals? Call the proud Americans of the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. And Patriot Gold Group has the No Fee for Life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver. And you may qualify for the No Fee for Life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Give them a call, 888-546-7020 for your free investor guide today. And now on with the video.
There's people listening in. There's folks that say Thailand is the best, Latin America. I often tell people sometimes it's best to stay where you are for different reasons. For other reasons, maybe go to some other parts of the planet. Your thoughts on relocation?
Again, if you have land and you're able to grow food and you have a clean water source and you're able to grow food with a community and you're near a farming community and it's off the beaten path I would hold there until you can't stay there anymore. Like there's no reason to just leave all those valuable resources. You know how many people would trade you in a millisecond to get to those clean land, clean water, safety zones that exist around in every nation. You just have to find them. Now, learning from what had happened in Ukraine, like even when I was looking at different spots to relocate to, Republic of Georgia was one because they had 8,000 years of continuous wine production. So for me, that's a big one because that means the climate didn't shift that much even during like massive cooling events of the different grand solar minimums through time, going back to the Greek minimum, 2500 BC, and they had one at 500 BC. And you get this whole string of them. You got the Oort minimum, the Sporer minimum, the Dalton minimum, the Maunder minimum. Like these are pretty regular on 400-year cycles, some more intense than others, obviously. But if you're telling me that they've had that winemaking for that long and it never stopped, it's been continuous. And everybody's saying, well, where did the first grape seeds come or the grape, cultivars come from? Well, and then you go back to stories of Noah's Ark and thing. Okay. But the point is, it's been continuous. And wine vines are very much a canary in the coal mine, just like oats are. Like if you're looking at oat production globally and you see massive declines in oats in certain producing regions like Volga in Russia, for example, climatically that something has definitely shifted. Oats are very finicky. Wine vines are very finicky. You need that right moisture. You need everything. So between maybe the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, I don't know, there might be a microclimate that exists between those two water bodies. And then I was looking at Sumba Island in Indonesia also. Massive, massive island. Hardly anybody ever goes there. It's right on the equator. The amount of food production there and sea life, like nobody really from Indo even wants to live there. They all want to stay up in Jakarta. They all want to stay up in, somewhere closer to Bali. They all want to be closer to where there's possibility to have quote unquote jobs. But if nukes were dropped, our economies would vaporize right along with that. And then you would be begging to get out onto a farm because those things known as jobs would no longer exist for a period of time or be very, very limited to the most basic things, doctors, farmers, but these kind of, service jobs and those in accounting and these kind of lawyers, that there's going to be nothing for you. It's going to come back to the very basics of keeping a society alive while that currency recorrects. And I don't know how long it would take, but those are my two choices and the reasons I chose those. But a nuke drop, everything financial is going to stop on a dime, and it's your paper is going to be pretty much worthless. And how long does it take to pick back up before people get that confidence again?
And even AI will, I think, again, I don't want to hype it, but I think it will go after certain segments of employment sector, as you mentioned. And so, I used to be a teacher, and we saw what they did with COVID. I heard stories from other teachers that I didn't lose my job, my contract finished, but you have a classroom of say 30 students, and with the COVID, you had one teacher who they let teachers go, and then one teacher would teach to 100 students, and it'd be online. And I think in the University of Adelaide, if I'm not mistaken, some university in Australia just recently announced they're doing away with in-person teaching. So it's going to be online. And then it'll probably be like Coursera. So you'll have like one teacher record. And so again, people need to, I think, focus on the world made by hand, have some plot of land, as you mentioned, water, food. I like Mongolia. I used to live in Mongolia. If I had married a Mongolian, I'm not single anymore, but if I were single, I'd go to Mongolia, or if I had married a Mongolian, I would have ended up staying in the Gobi. And there you depend on the animal husbandry. So camels and horses, and it's a rough terrain, but I think it's also, I guess, I don't know, you think things are we going to a colder future?
I just did a video maybe 3 or 4 days ago talking about the Gobi Desert greening also. And China also put another very, very large hydroelectric dam up in Xinjiang, way up where there's hardly any rainfall coming out of the mountains. It's just mainly snow melt. But they must know something also. So you got some of the driest places in Africa. They installed the largest hydroelectric dams in Africa. And, that's a white elephant too. When I first originally saw those news stories, like, oh no, they're just white elephant. You're putting a hydroelectric dam here. That thing's never going to fill up. And it filled years in front of where they said it would take 7 years to fill up. And I thought it was a joke anyway that they would put it in the highlands there. Like, who's ever going to run electricity? That's crazy. It filled 5 years faster than their forecasts, and it's already generating electricity. And that's the first foothold there to then step down dams and create the manufacturing zone. So if you're looking at believe it or not, South Sudan is going to be very wealthy because they're going to have constant electricity and setting up as an agricultural zone, export zone, and then they got the ports there at Port Sudan. So, you start to run all this out if they got constant electricity. Well, in Xinjiang also, up there putting a hydroelectric dam up in the desert, you're like, I understand the snow melt phenomenon, right? I get it. It melts every year. But to have the foresight of after the snow melts, your water's gone, that it's going to somehow replenish itself. And there's been massive rainfall all over the place up through Xinjiang, all the way over into Mongolia. Gobi Desert's greening as much as the Sahara Desert. I encourage anybody to look at the Middle East. These incredible photos coming out of Oman where lakes are forming in the desert. The amount of greenery just popping out of nowhere. Saudi Arabia and the empty quarters, just vast, like lakes filling up in between the sand dunes, like just vegetation takes off in an instant there, all the way across the Sahel, just massive green. When you look at the Earth Viewer, NASA Earth Viewer, you can see that really demarcated. Wow, look how much vegetation had moved up a couple hundred miles and the density of it. Gobi Desert's getting green. So I'm absolutely saying we are on a multi-millennia shift here, pattern of hydrological cycle. And again, does this all tie into why all this is happening now? Because the signs that the amplification is ongoing and is continuing to amplify is sort of, all right, the cycle's in earnest begun. Maybe they were waiting for the starting gun, but whatever those signals were that they were waiting for to jump and really enact a lot of this, well, it seems to have given the signal, because all these deserts regreening and then the Amazon's going into a mega drought phase. So something has shifted and is in process of shifting, and the extremes we've seen now are probably not going to be the most extreme that you'll experience. It's probably at the beginning of, very extreme, but we're going to get into extremely extreme. We're sort of in that midway, moving up to, wow, I can't believe that is even possible area.
You mentioned Oman, just for fun, on the Apple charts in the politics category. Geopolitics and Empire hit #1 in Oman. I think Mozambique as well, Botswana. And so the charts shift, but it's fun to hit #1 in some of these countries. Have been #1 in Croatia as well, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and the extremes that you mentioned here in Mexico, we have the rainy season, which begins from around May, June, July, August, dies down in September. A year ago, I had to install, I've been here for over a decade, right? And so, and no, I'm not talking about global warming, man-made global warming, but we had a drought, severe in this year and last year. And it was so hot. The first time it's been so hot in my lifetime here, I had to install air conditioning. And so again, stuff is going on beyond some of the stuff that we've talked about. We talked about World War, nuclear wars, specter, the food, of course, that's going on, climate changes, solar cycles. Are there any other threats that are on your mind? Just what I'm thinking about. Another one could be Mad Max sort of scenario. What's that movie with based on Cormac McCarthy's book? I think The Road. The book is great, and the movie is pretty good too. Viggo Mortensen, where if things do sort of collapse, maybe for a while, we might have to worry about like roving gangs or insecurity cartels. Not just in Mexico, right? But in different parts of the world where law and order break down. Are there any other things that threats you're worrying about?
Well, just to address that point, I've had that conversation with a few people asking, how long that threat would be in play, and almost unanimously less than 4 months, because people want stability. If gangs are coming around, communities are going to get together to take law into their own hands to prevent that threat from coming back again. Like they're going to be the first ones taken out of the scenario. Yeah, they might get some food for a little time, but it's not going to take long before you hear those motorcycles coming up the road when a handful of people get together and just start taking them out, and communities rushing together to do this, because our police forces will be non-existent at that point. Like you look at what happened in North Carolina, the looting started just 4 days after. 4 days. I was expecting a week, something, it's supposed to be tight-knit community. Everybody, up in the mountains there, really self-sufficient and thing. But down in Nashville, the looting started in 4 days. And I'm like, you're telling me in this world that we're existing in, that you don't have 4 days of food in your house? And this is in Asheville, not far up in the mountains, not somewhere where, it takes 2 days on a mule train to get up there. In the city, all the world events going on, and you don't have 4 days of food in your house, and you got to go out and start beating up people and stealing their stuff because you didn't prepare. That's borderline insanity. And, you start to look at how the world has, the media is telling people, oh, it's all okay. It's all okay. The biggest threat I see now is the unexpected events from the sun or the changing magnetic field. And in the human domain, how a weakening magnetic field would also affect the way we perceive reality or the way that we think. Because your brain's electromagnetic and it's tied to our magnetic field, and our Earth's magnetic field is tied to the sun. So something is happening with there, and there's a huge amount of, electric voltage coming in on our planet in those F layers. And that just simply means that boundary where space, quote unquote, stops. And there's this layer that those magnetic field lines, electric charge lines, come in and connect to our atmosphere. That's how we have charge all the way down to the ground. That's what Nikola Tesla was talking about harvesting. Down here near the ground layer, it's like 6 millivolts or so. But when you get higher up, it's substantial. You're talking about aurora coming in that are highly charged, and this kind of, electricity beyond anything you can comprehend of what we can produce on the planet. This is all and these layers keep getting supercharged. And it usually takes about 6 weeks, give or take, after a solar storm for all that captured. Those electrons, protons, those particles up there that are holding in those layers, it takes about 6 weeks to move them out. But now it's just solar storm after solar storm where they never have a chance to release out, and it just gets more electrified and more electrified.
Any other thoughts on weathering whatever the heck is coming?
Well, you're going to have to get, one thing I could say, though, that I've learned from all this disaster that's going on in North Carolina, East Tennessee, you're going to have ham radios or communication device ham, because that's pretty much the way everybody was communicating and still is, because the ham network, they took mule trains up with their own antennas to reestablish the network up there after there was some damage. But a huge, huge amount. There were dozens, plural, of mobile phone towers that were washed away in the flash floods, never to be seen. That's on the mountains. And what happened in the cities and tributaries heading further down into the cities is something very different. I'm talking about the ones that were in the mountains that have spotty service anyway. Like those were all wiped away. That's going to take a long time to get that area reconnected. But people were communicating by ham radio. And having that network that you know the repeaters, the frequencies of the repeaters, what time they're doing check-ins, and which ones are going to be emergency broadcast channels. So if you have to do a check-in or wellness check for somebody, that you can hit the frequencies. And electrical outages is another thing, because I keep trying to push us over to this wind and solar, which is very very unreliable, right? So it's almost on purpose that a regular, stable, reliable electric supply is being knocked out at the knees right along with the food supply. So if you're going to do any planning, you're going to think about electrical generation, and having a generator relies on the fuel source and a supply chain for the fuel. So you're going to have to go beyond that, because you can almost expect that the power is going to be going out at some point, either intermittently, 3 days at a time, 2 weeks at a time. Look what's happening in Cuba. How are they getting by that down there? That's a perfect example. But, how prepared are we for electrical outages? That's not widely talked about. Everybody talks about having food and having the water and that, straws and ways to purify water. Okay, that's like your base layer. But after you get that taken care of, you need to, at least this is where I'm also trying to, find my, open holes or cracks in my planning out here, is electrical production that's large enough, consistent enough that I can do on my own with the devices to run refrigerators and freezers. Because the amount of silver that's used and I'm trying to wind this back into the point here, because there's a huge amount of silver used in all of these solar panels, different types of green products, and your washing machine, your computer has gold in it too. But silver is going to be in more short supply, because you can't really recycle a lot of silver out of these devices. It's not cost effective at today's price, so it's not going to be recycled. The weapons that we use are always running silver in the circuits. And you come forward and there's new solid state batteries that are going to use 32 ounces of silver. You start to look at some of these things and go, all right, well, some metals may do better than others, but there's actually an industrial purpose for silver. So, how do you protect yourself? Which winds you back into, if they're trying to feed the world solar panels and they're cutting down our food production, our orchards, our vineyards, and this sort of thing to put these windmills and on our crop producing fields. Those wheat fields, they're covered in windmills. You can't plant under there anymore. They're wiping out part of the food source by installing all this new tech on top. And that trend is going to continue. So the usage for metals will continue. But inversely, that the areas that they're scraping clean are our food growing areas to put the new tech on top. So you start to see there's duality moving forward of there's going to be more crop losses. Food's going to get more expensive because they're actually destroying the areas to grow food. And they're also installing the new non-reliable tech on top. So then you start to get these double layers of, how can I protect against that?
I've had a hypothesis, maybe run this by you, that maybe one of the reasons they sell us on man-made climate change, which ergo means us rationing, reducing our energy, forcing us to reduce our energy use, less food, less meat, less electricity generation, less use of cars. And now we're seeing at the same time AI all of a sudden pop up, and how AI will demand an insane amount of water and electricity in some states like Virginia. I've read that in Virginia alone, AI sucks 25% of the state's electricity or more. Amazon is now, they're going into nuclear reactors, small modular reactors. On my TNT show 2 years ago, I had a nuclear Bitcoiner on who works in the Canadian nuclear industry. The archives are still up. He, 2 years ago, he said, this is the future. They're going to start rolling out small modular nuclear reactors. And so I'm wondering if they're trying to get us to use less energy because they're going to need that energy to run their AI, which will be the basis for these smart cities. Does that sort of make any sense to you?
Certainly does, but you need the excuse. So if you knew in the 1990s, you had records stretching back 500 years that had been pillaged from across the planet. Vatican holds an enormous amount. Smithsonian, many museum, libraries, private collections, oligarchs, etc. They hold a vast amount of data that's not privy to the general public. Now, what if you knew that this cycle was coming back again, and the present way of life or present society that was in place at that time wouldn't survive the change, just like the last 10 of these haven't survived. They re-evolve as a new iteration. Well, we're at that point again. Okay, well, you got to sit there in a boardroom and say, all right, well, really, realistically, in the next 30 years, we're not going to be able to salvage most of this. Economies will collapse. People are going to move. There's going to be huge population migration. Food prices are going to get really expensive because we're not going to be able to grow food as plentifully as we did. The yields are going to be way down. And, the economy is going to be in shambles because the jobs and this sort of thing. And what do you think we could do? Well, everybody's going to see it with their own eyes in just a little bit. Give them 20 years and there's going to be massive storms everywhere. So let me see. Let's feed them as the excuse. Because if you knew this was here now, and everybody is seeing it with their own eyes, there's not one person that doesn't know that there's extremes to the Uber going across the planet right now. But if there was no excuse built in for that change, you might get a little nervous. But see, you got two birds with one stone on that one. What you described with the electrical use, got to use less, got to eat bugs, can't do this, stay home, no flying. And also you're reducing electrical, but at the same time, these mega corporations running their dirty ships across the oceans. Hey, it's Christmas, buy two. Bits of junk going across the Pacific back and forth. Oh, buy two, it's Christmas. Oh, wait, you got to eat bugs because we don't want to pollute the planet. Well, wait, your factories are running over there and you want to make me to buy two because they're on sale and ship that stuff from China and you're telling me to eat bugs? No, your factories, those plastics facilities, I don't own one of those. That's a mega corporation, microplasticking all over the planet. And then all this extra energy, which you said, we're not allowed to have the power and use it for anything because we have to sit here, and burn candles at night. Oh, wait, you're putting too much CO2. You can't even have a candle in your house any longer. You can only live in daylight hours and go back to the serfs. They couldn't afford candles either. And basically their houses and barns burned down when they used candles a lot. House fires. So you got to only work from daylight to sunset, and that's it. And you can't have anything else. This is the message they're giving us. But on the inverse, it's baffling how corporations can continue to pollute unabated. Nobody says a single thing. And then the electrical usage being pulled. And then, if maybe it is pebble bed nuclear reactors, And again, why are we not experimenting with some of these Tesla technologies? Or maybe they are going to roll them out with all this alien talk of aliens and this, that, and the other. Maybe it's a soft core way to introduce electrogravitics and levitation technologies without saying, hey, we screwed you for the last 120 years and made you go to work 40, 50 hours of work to pay your electricity and pay for that gasoline. You never needed that, because people would be angry if they learned that, you know?
Yeah, I could see them rolling out these aliens levitation technologies. I guess it's going to be a fun road ahead.
It is.
Any other thoughts, issues, or things that you want to get across that we should think about?
Well, I think that right, what you said right there is the most important point. This is a mind game moving forward. You can either enjoy the ride, and I've been scolded by many people like, how are you happy? And you're looking at all these things happening. I'm like, wait, I'm just processing the information, and I'm looking at it as validation for how I see the world moving out, so I can protect myself and move through the Rubik's Cube and maybe go through the maze in a different direction than you're going. And I'm celebrating these incredible events from the heavens and things that are coming out of just the vastness of, we're such a little tiny planet here, little tiny dot moving around. But these other things that are on a galactic, like more time frame, and understanding how electrical currents flow through space, and once they get and touch our planet here, how it creates these auroras. And, the stronger those get, it just validates that the sun's magnetic field is changing on our Earth, which offers possibilities for manifestation. But again, you can look at this in two ways, like, oh, the world's ending, I'm going to get under my desk and just like shake all day long. Or you can embrace it and go, I am so happy I'm growing my own food right now. I'm happy I got my orchard up 3 years ago. We already got fruit. We got peaches, we got apples, and got pears, heavy, heavy pears this year. I am so excited that we have chickens and ducks, and that I have a place to walk around. Like, the leaves are all changing now. After we finish here, we're going to go grab a couple glasses of wine and walk around the property and look at all the leaf change. Like, I am super grateful and very, very thankful of everything I have. And I wouldn't have it or be in this position unless I was seeing these changes come and embracing them versus fearing them. Now, there's don't get me wrong, there's a level of, when there's a flood coming down the hill, you need to get out of the way, or a landslide coming down. You can't just think, oh, look at the rocks rolling, so pretty. But there's a huge difference in embracing the chaos and embracing the change and making smart decisions out of knowledge versus fear. And I think that is the main takeaway, and you hit on it right there perfectly.
No, what you said, I love embracing the chaos. And, I'm coming from the biblical world where Jesus keeps saying, don't have fear, don't have fear. Stay away from the people that project this nonstop spirit of fear. There's a great meme that I came across the other day. It says, pessimist, glass half empty; optimist, glass half full; psalmist, like the Psalms in the Bible, my cup runneth over. So I'm a psalmist, and I think what you said, embrace the chaos. And I'm like a little kid in the candy shop every day, firing up the computer, looking at global events, and it's just like, you don't take it to heart. I'm just like, I'm in awe, basically. I'm in awe. I'm like, wow, look, that's happening. This is happening. I'm not afraid. And then as you say, you go, the sun is shining here in Mexico, going to have some coffee, go with the kids, go to the park, whatever. And so you don't let it get to you. And it's just, for me, it's amazing. As you say, it's just amazing to be witnessing this moment in time, everything that's going on. And so let me just ask you just one more thing. Any thought on BRICS? How important is it for you? What do you think about, they just wrapped up. Thoughts on BRICS?
We've definitely jumped into a new era. That declaration of moving to a trimetallic system of gold, silver, and palladium, and I'm sure they're going to include platinum, so it would be a quad metallic system as the base. And the real wealth is your resource traded for another resource, whether that's a ship of wheat for a ship of manganese. Those cross trades and anything that's an overage on that can be settled inside that BRICS currency. It's not going to be exclusively 100% used. But, to take the lion's share of global trade away from the US dollar, that's going to do some serious damage. Also, the Arctic routes, which I talked to Andy Schechtman many a time on this, where the Arctic routes seem to be really heavily influenced by technology increases and advancements. Like these super cold climates, you can't run most tires up there. Russians are up there, Chinese are up there, and they're trying to figure out really very hardy cold weather technologies, redoing any types of vehicles and shipping, setting up different towns up there to have cargo at a certain spot, just like you would do on the Silk Road. Approximately every 20 miles, they had an area for the animals to rest. The same thing. They're setting up transit points all across the Arctic outside the U.S. Navy influence. Like there's nowhere the U.S. Navy can get up through there. They're trespassing if they do. So these innovations and how a new system is being set up, again, when I'm looking at possible, I'll stay here as long as I can. But if this place is absolutely going up in flames where you're going to die in your chair here, just going, maybe you need to hit the ejector seat. And if you do, then I've never been to Kazakhstan. I keep reading about it. The meetings are there. I'm curious really what's there. Like there's some of these areas, and I only went out to Xinjiang when I was living in China. Didn't go out to like Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan and these kind of places, but that big, large mass right there in the center that seemed to be the next largest, let's say, settlement area people were heading to on the Silk Road to get to Almaty somewhere over there. It seems fascinating. You're winding back the clock multi-thousands of years of history and trade, and these areas are still very dynamic and economically prosperous after 4,000 years. So if you're looking at relocating, would you not, and I would, consider a BRICS nation, knowing that these other nations that are like hooked on the US dollar, hooked on our mentality of control through war, moving over to maybe exist or live in one of these other nations, if you would even be allowed to with a U.S. passport. I would say that. But the BRICS is, people go, well, they're never going to get it together. Okay, it started with 5 nations. Now there's over 120. You think they're not getting it together? They have meetings daily across the planet. I follow a bunch of news feeds on Twitter, on Telegram. I get into the African news and into the BRICS news and this sort of thing. Every single day there are meetings going on across all of these nations. If you think they only have these big meetings once a year and they're not getting anything, we're just not getting the news. But this is a full court press, 24/7 across the planet of all these nations in unison. And where was the Congo, or was it Cameroon that just said no more gold exports? We're keeping it all here for our base of the reserve currency. So no more gold exports coming out of the country. We're going to keep it here. We're going to build on top and create our own layer for BRICS to roll in for our own backstop. It's real. It's here. I don't know if you agree with that, but I mean, it's something significant in my opinion. This is a world-shifting group of nations that are going to be an economic trading bloc.
The times they are changing, as Bob Dylan would say. I'd agree with you. Despite my criticisms as to the nature of BRICS itself,
yeah, right.
That's separate from what you're saying, the action. And so I do think the BRICS countries will, at least in the beginning, in the near term, economically, be growing and all that. And so, again, we're talking about survival. If you have to, why not go to a BRICS country? And I've lived in Kazakhstan, wonderful place. The winters, the cold it's brutal there. It is brutal, but you adapt to it. I don't mind the cold. I can do extreme cold. I've lived in a yurt in the Gobi in Mongolia, and so we got the David Dubine download here. Any final thought?
Yeah, thanks. Just one dovetailing remark on that. You're right. In the beginning, it's going to be very cooperative, and there's going to be a lot of peace between this, and they're not going to use militaries to run around the planet and dominate. Okay, in the beginning. But you're right. What happens 20 years after everything is fully established? 30 years after that? That's when you start to look down the road and go, are they going to mimic and repeat these mistakes in history that we have followed?